The next day Lin went back to the dungeon hall and he checked the information for the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The other students quickly recognized Lin from the day before, and since Lin was checking the information for the Desert Tyrant dungeon, they began to wonder if Lin was here to break the record for the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The record holder for the dungeon is Fei Long Academy. Lin guessed that Fei Long Academy is on par with the Serpent Dragon Academy, but he questioned why it took them 16 hours to clear the dungeon when they had a team of 40 hunters. Han approached Lin. She was shocked to see Lin in the dungeon hall again today. She asked him if he plans on entering the Desert Tyrant dungeon. Lin cleared so many dungeons yesterday, so she thought he would rest today. Lin told her he was, and said he wanted to acquire the Tyrant Heart. Han was shocked. The Tyrant Heart only drops from the final boss. She explained that it's possible to craft a powerful accessory with the Tyrant Heart, but the Tyrant Heart itself is rare. It only drops once a year, and the last time a team was able to get the Tyrant Heart was 2 years ago. Han asked Lin if he really planned on challenging the Desert Tyrant dungeon by himself. She protested against the idea, saying it's too dangerous because he doesn't have a team and he just reached level 20 yesterday. She asked Lin to try and find a team in the dungeon hall. Lin remained silent, so she reminded him that the record for the dungeon hasn't been broken in 4 years, and it took a team of 40 hunters to set the record. As the two were discussing, a team of young hunters entered the dungeon hall and approached Lin and the Desert Tyrant dungeon. The students in the dungeon hall recognized them as the team from Baialai Academy that's been preparing to take on the Desert Tyrant dungeon for a long time. And from the looks of it, they were ready. Each member of the party was wearing a set of gold level armor. The leader of the Baialai Academy's team pulled his party aside, and he told them that today they must set a new record. He says they have prepared too much to have someone mess up today. He looked to his side, finally noticing Lin and Han. He began to wonder if Lin and Han were also planning to enter the dungeon. Lin began making his way up the stairs to the Desert Tyrant dungeon, and the other students began to gossip. They asked among themselves if anyone had been able to solo clear the Desert Tyrant dungeon. A student says this is a first, and if Lin succeed, he'll make history. The leader of Baialai Academy's party observed Lin, questioning if he planned on entering the Desert Tyrant dungeon alone. He hadn't seen Lin before, and Lin was entering a large-scale dungeon alone, so he thought he was a newbie. He also wondered why no one told Lin a large-scale dungeon was difficult to clear even with 40 people. He turned to his party and told them not to pay attention to a fool like Lin. He then ordered them to prepare for teleportation. Inside the dungeon, Lin was having a hard time determining his location. The sun was directly overhead, and since it was a large-scale dungeon, he concluded that the dungeon might be enormous. He summoned some skeleton warriors and spread them out in all directions, and he tracked them. Entering a large-scale dungeon costs 500 points each time, and refreshing the cooldown costs 2,000 points. Looking at it this way, Lin's remaining 80,000 points won't last long. The skeletons came across their first monster, a desert ghost tree. Lin was taken aback by the monster because its stats were comparable to a level 24 boss in the mermaid dungeon. His skeleton warriors began attacking the desert ghost tree, but this time they couldn't one-shot it, and if it wasn't for his skeleton warriors leveling up to silver grade, taking on the ghost trees would have been difficult. His skeletons were able to kill the ghost tree, and Lin got experience comparable to a boss monster. Lin thought the dungeon was a leveling paradise. He took out his scythe and activated his skeleton armor skill. Lin wanted to be safe since danger lurks in the dunes. Lin made his way through the dungeon surrounded by his skeleton warriors. And 2 hours later he came across an oasis. Lin stood back and he sent his skeleton warriors to check it out first. He thought other monsters were gathered nearby, and just as he suspected, his skeletons were attacked by an oasis giant scorpion. This made him happy. He sent his skeletons to check it out first. His skeletons used the rage shot skill, killing the scorpion. With a moment to breathe, Lin looked around and noticed a group of scorpions surrounding a tree with fruit. This shocked him because he never heard of a dungeon producing consumable items. He summoned a skeleton warrior and ordered it to go pick a fruit for him. He had the others block the scorpions while the other one collected the fruit. The skeleton warrior brought the fruit back and Lin grabbed it, wondering what effects it would have. The fruit's name is Desert Oasis Fruit, and he learnt that it could rapidly restore a large amount of spiritual power, but the fruit must be consumed within 5 minutes of it being picked. Lin ate the fruit and his spiritual power began to recover rapidly. As long as there are enough fruits here, his spirit would never run out no matter what he does. Lin smiled, because this place is a sanctuary for practicing his skills and leveling them up. He summoned a skeleton mage. He had been wondering how he would upgrade the skeleton mage summoning skill, and this just provided the perfect opportunity. His spirit can be replenished continuously, so he can keep summoning the skeleton mages. He wanted the skill to reach level 20 so the skeleton mages could reach silver tier like his skeleton warriors. 3 hours later he reached level 20 on the skeleton mage summoning skill. Lin summoned 4 skeleton mages, one with the explosive flame skill, one with the thunderstorm skill, one with the ice spear skill, and one with the tornado skill. He turned to the scorpions and he asked them if they were having fun killing his skeletons. He said it was his turn to return the favor. Using their skills, Lin's skeleton mages wiped out the group of scorpions in front of them. However, a large group of scorpions appeared. Lin grabbed a fruit from his inventory and smiled. The large-scale dungeon was finally living up to his expectations. He says the dungeon wasn't the only one with an army. Lin summoned his army of skeleton warriors to match the scorpions. As long as the other monsters in the dungeon were on the same level as the scorpions in the ghost tree, Lin thought he could solo the dungeon. Lin's skeleton mages activated their skills providing corpses so Lin could use Corpse Explosion. Corpse Explosion paired with his skeleton mage skill provided cover while his skeleton warriors slayed the scorpions. A while later there were no monsters left at the oasis. Lin was saddened by this because he forgot to level up his other skills. He thought the dungeon would be perfect if the monsters spawned in groups like that continuously. But since he was able to get his skeleton mages to silver grade, it was time to locate the boss. The longer he dragged things out, the lower his chances are of getting the tyrant heart. As he walked through the desert he noticed a dust cloud approaching quickly from behind. He activated his skeleton armor skill and jumped high into the air, where he noticed that the dust cloud was a horde of soldier ants. Lin landed on a dune wondering where the ants were going in such a hurry. He tailed the soldier ants and they led him to their nest. He made his way through the nest and came across a desert flying ant. The flying ants are considered the personal troops for the queen ant. The flying ant noticed Lin and attacked, however it wasn't doing a lot of damage because of Lin's skeleton armor skill. Lin asked the ant if it was trying to bully him because he didn't level up his skeleton armor skill at the oasis. He summoned a skeleton mage and took out the flying ant, however the mage's attack drew an army of ants to their location. Lin summoned his skeleton warriors and more skeleton mages. He ordered his skeleton warriors to find the queen ant while he and the mages handled the ants alone. The skeleton warriors left and Lin and his skeleton mages began wiping out the army of ants. However, it seemed like there was no end to the ants. A few minutes later his skeletons were able to locate the boss and they alerted Lin. Lin looked at his map and was happy his skeletons were able to find the boss quickly. He wanted to head over to the boss so he could introduce himself. Lin made his way to the boss room and saw the queen surrounded by her personal army. He became disappointed after seeing the boss because it didn't look challenging. He ordered his skeleton warriors to finish the queen ant quickly, however as his skeleton approached the queen ant used the storm strike skill. The skill was on the same grade as his skeleton warriors and it did some damage to Lin and his skeletons. Lin managed to survive because he had the skeleton armor skill active. Lin recalled his skeleton mages from their previous location and summoned them again. Then he ordered them to stall the queen's personal guard while the skeleton warriors attacked the queen ant. The skeleton mages were able to kill the queen's personal guard, but the skeleton warriors were pushed back by the queen's shockwave skill. After pushing the skeleton warriors back, the queen curled into a ball and activated the ant summoning skill. Lin thought the queen was using a defensive skill. He didn't want to waste his time so he summoned more skeleton warriors. The queen's skill activated and an army of ants appeared. Lin smiled. The queen was basically begging to die. He activated the corpse explosion skill, wiping out the army of ants and the queen. As a reward for defeating the ant queen, Lin received 80,000 experience, 1 silver grade queen ant's spear, 1 silver grade queen ant's ring, and the queen ant's egg. He was happy because the items he obtained from the queen ant can be sold for a lot of gold. And for just killing the scorpions at the oasis and wiping out the ant's nest, his experience bar increased by 78%. The dungeon was truly a great place to farm levels, but unfortunately he doesn't have a lot of time left. For now he needs to find the tyrant heart quickly, so he decided to come back to farm levels next time. 2 hours later, after fighting giant death worms, Lin came across a fortress. Inside the fortress, the lion tyrant, a world-level leader, sat on his throne, with his army knelt in front of him awaiting a challenger. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video then hit the like button.